Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you to my fellow glass sellers and my family and my friends for joining us this evening. I'm going to try and make this as quick as possible, and if there's time at the end, I've got a 5-minute video clip of a piece of glass being made, but we won't do that if we're running on. So, okay, so the Wilkinson family started with my great uncle Frank, my granddad's brother, and as you can see, he only lived to the ripe old age of 30 years old, and he was a cameo worker at Thomas Webb and Sons up to the war, the First World War, and straight afterwards. But in 1920, he opened his own business, Wilkinson and Co. He was in Platts Lane in Stourbridge, which some of you will actually know. I always enjoy driving down there and wondering where my great uncle's works used to be. So he had 4 glass engravers, 3 intaglio cutters, 14 glass cutters, and 8 in his etching room. So it was quite a big affair. And my grandfather, Reg, joined the company in 1922. So this was some of the things that they used to do. It was mainly wholesale pieces of glass for other companies, and there was a price list, and as you can see, some things are 38 shillings per dozen if you have the largest size, and or 12 and 6pence per dozen. So it was very inexpensive in those days. So and this was a glass factory in 1830. Well, it was a pretty dangerous place to work, I would have thought. And as you can see, there was a big shaft running through the centre of the workshop with leather belts coming down to machines, and you couldn't stop that big shaft, which was being run by a steam engine or something, or maybe a water wheel. You had to knock the belt off of your own machine to stop it, and knock it back on again when you wanted it to start. So anyway, so my grandfather joined the company in 22, and he ran the decoration side of the business. His older brother, Joe, ran the business actually until the 1960s. And I remember when my dad used to take me up to Stourbridge, we used to go and see different glass companies, and they all spoke fondly of Uncle Joe. And in actual fact, even as late as the 1990s, I went into one of the glass factories or cutting shops up there, and I mentioned that my name was Wilkinson, and they said, "Are you related to Joe?" And I said, "Yeah, that was my great uncle." So everyone spoke very fondly of him. So when it came to the war, the Second World War, my grandfather, they closed all the glass factories in Stourbridge and probably all over the country, and everybody had to join in with the war effort. My grandfather moved his family down to London, and which some people might think is a silly place because it's probably where they sent the most bombs. But anyway, he got a job working with the Admiralty, and he after the war, he decided that it was no point in going back to Stourbridge because there wouldn't be any work up there. The glass factories were still closed. So he decided to set up his own little glass cutting shop in London, in a basement in Balham, and he did that with my father, and that was about 1947. This is not the premises that they were in 1947. This was when they moved to the big time, when they got to probably the late 50s, I think. Um, so this was a factory they had in a bigger factory in Vallum, and I remember my father taking me to work there, during school holidays and things like that. And my grandfather carried on working in the company until the early 60s, and then he handed over the business to my father and my uncle, Roy. He then went on to, my grandfather had his own shop, glass shop in Wimbledon, and he also then wrote a book which was called The Hallmarks of Antique Glass. So this was my dad in the top left corner cutting a piece of glass as a very young man, and that's my grandfather on the right hand side, and my uncle Roy, who was a young apprentice, helping my grandfather polish a vase. I know that I'm not sure exactly the day that the date that my grandfather retired, but I know that it was prior to November 1963, because I remember my dad taking me to work, and he stopped to go into the cafe to get some rolls for our lunch. And I was listening to the radio in the car, and they said that President Kennedy had been assassinated. I told my father when he came back, he was shocked. But I know that my grandfather wasn't working then, so I know it was prior to that. So, right. So that was my grandfather's book, and people describe it as one of the best books written on the subject of antique glass, and he explains about forgeries and how things were made and that sort of thing. So this is my father working at a glass cutting machine. For most of the time that I knew him, he always had a beard, and he continued to cut glass, even when he retired from the business. He came back once to help me out and did some cutting for me. So he was a really good man to me. I didn't get on very well with him as a child growing up, probably because I was pretty horrible. But I become much closer to him. This was a photograph of my dad on Mandy's and my wedding day. So anyway, and these are the sort of things that people used to bring to my. I should explain that gradually we got into the repairs and restoration of glass. Instead of just cutting new pieces, an antique dealer came along and said, "I've got all this broken glass. Can you recut it to make it saleable?" And so they said, "Well, we'll give it a go," and that's what they did. And the antique dealer came back a couple of weeks later and picked it up and was delighted. And he bought back £5,000 worth of work, which was probably a year's worth of work at that time. So, my grandfather and father were definitely in the antique repair and restoration business. So these are sort of typical things. If you couldn't repair a piece of glass, we'd have to get a piece of glass made, which we didn't do. But my grandfather or father would go to the Whitefriars factory and usually slip a 10-shilling note in a packet of cigarettes and hand it to one of the glass makers. And when they come out of work, then miraculously they'd have that piece of glass that they needed, that they made in their tea break or something. So this is a typical. We still do more of this now than any other repair, and that is taking the chips out of glasses. So we made lots of bottles and things, and we did. As you can see on the left there's some engraving work on that flask, and so we Initially, we weren't engravers, but we did. We taught ourselves, and we took on a glass engraver. A little bit later, we started doing glass for the film and TV industry and advertising. These were lead crystal ice cubes that didn't melt under the spotlights, the film lights, or on location. And I remember when I first started working for my dad, that they were filming an advert with Bacardi somewhere out in the Caribbean, and they'd forgotten their ice cubes, and so they chartered a jet and came and collected some glass ice cubes from us and flew them out there just so they could make their adverts. So another picture of these are my granddad's old paintings and things that he had, or paintings on glass, and that is that's a typical furnace, a glass furnace, usually in a cone, which you can still see some of them up in Stourbridge, and so you'd have lots of pots where people could go and gather glass and then pull it out and work it into the pieces of glass that they need. So it was a busy place, a glass house. So before we had our own glass cutter, we used to use Whitefriars glass, and our glass maker there, it wasn't any relation to us, but his name was Ronnie Wilkinson, and some of you will know Ronnie Wilkinson. He was quite a character, huge man, and a part of all glass makers in Tuttlman's was they were allowed 8 pints of ale per day. Or 8 pints of beer a day, and this was from the time when you wouldn't drink water because it was it would be, there'd be all kinds of bacteria and things in it, so people drank weak beer. Well, Ronnie insisted he was allowed to have 8 pints of beer every day, and the glass company had to pay for it. So, but he was a huge character, great glass maker, and when he retired, he got a job working in a car park, a car park attendant. And some years later, when I started making glass, when we started to use the glass house at Covent Garden, we managed to persuade Ronnie to come back with a small team and blow glass for us on a Saturday morning or a Saturday for a whole day. And so I was able to reassemble that same team, and they worked in Covent Garden for us perhaps one day a month. So when my father was running the business, after my grandfather had retired, my father became more and more specialised in chandeliers. This was the sort of thing that he was challenged with. This was at the Buxton Town Hall at Buxton Crescent, and this was a photograph that of the chandelier. There were lots and lots of photographs of them, and obviously you could see the amount of damage on it. And so my father restored it. We made all the replacement pieces and did all the missing pieces. And some years later, that we had to go and take it back down again while they were doing it up. And then my staff went back last year and put them back up again. And it is now a hotel and spa. And this was Mandy and I were invited there for a weekend, or an overnight stay, and we were able to view the chandeliers that my father had restored many years before, and my guys had put up again. So when I joined the company, 1974, this was my father's workshop in Forest Hill, and at that time, my father employed a glass engraver. That's the man on the right. It was Tommy Caulfield, who was a glass engraver for Waterford. and he actually taught me to do some copper wheel engraving during his lunch break and that sort of thing. On the left is a picture of my father, and he was using a diamond pen or tungsten pen to do this scratch type engraving on it. So, and these were examples of some of Tommy's work that he did, and he was, yeah, he was a really good engraver. But unfortunately, we didn't have enough work to keep him fully employed. So eventually, he left us. He became a masseur. So, and Catherine will know that, because I've told her before, that I studied for a while at Morley College in the evening at night classes, glass engraving with Peter Dreiser, who is one of the best in glass engravers, you know, of our time. And so I enjoyed his teaching me at these night classes. And we did use him several times at a later date when we didn't have a glass engraver. This is a chandelier from Kingston Lacey, a house in stately home in, I think it's in Dorset, and they thought it was a Victorian chandelier. It was all wrapped up in newspaper in boxes in their cellar and had been there for years. And when my dad said, "Oh no, this is a very important Adams chandelier, and it's worth £100,000," they were absolutely flabbergasted. I mean, now that chandelier is probably worth £1 million. And that was a picture of my dad and me. I think it was in the Sunday Telegraph or Sunday Times magazine, and that was a very young-looking me with my dad as well. So. So my dad was asked to repair a lot of the glass for Buckingham Palace. There were various things that they had. They had a suite of glass that was made by the Waterford factory in Ireland, and the Buckingham Palace went to Waterford and said, "Can you repair our glass? We've got lots of broken pieces or chipped pieces." And they said, "No, we can't do it. You need to use Wilkinson that are in London." So they came to us and we started to repair their glass. And then after some years, I eventually applied for and was awarded the royal appointment to the Queen. A lot of it was down to the previous effort that my father had put in, but it was me that was awarded it, and I still have it today. So I think that was 1986. So you see, I've had it for quite a long time. This was something that we did for the V&A. This was a broken candlestick, very early candlestick, and once again, a very young me holding it, posing for a photograph. As you can see, I grew a beard as well in those days, because when I took over the business from my father, I was still a young man, and people used to come along and say, "Hello, Sonny, can I talk to your dad?" And I said, "No, it's me, I'm the boss." So I grew the beard to make me look a bit older. But when Jodie was a small child, a baby, she burst into tears when I shaved it off and looked at her. So, and that's the final thing, which was photographed for, I don't know, not sure what. So then we got to the 1980s, and late 1980s, 88 I think it was, and I bought that factory. You can see on the left-hand side a big place in Catford, and I opened my first showroom in Mayfair. It was in those days we had lots and lots of work, and you could borrow lots and lots of money, which was really good because I didn't have the money to do either. Anyway, it was a great time, an exciting time, being in retail in Mayfair and having a big new factory. About 89, I think it was, the assembly rooms in Bath said, could we restore their chandeliers? And they've got an amazing collection of chandeliers, and this was typical of what one looked like. So we got the job. It took 3 years to restore all the chandeliers. There's 10 chandeliers there, and I still maintain it's probably the most important and most valuable collection of chandeliers in any one building in this country. This is a much more recent photograph, but I'm showing you this because the chandeliers that our Lord Mayor and our past master and our clerk and our beadle, the chandelier above their head is one that I made. So we made lots of chandeliers for Mansion House in 1993. So those in the drawing room, and the next picture, I think, oh, that's the Egyptian hall, and you can see all the dish lights hanging all the way around the outside. We made all of those as well. And on top of the reservoirs, there's a dragon, and he's holding a shield with the London insignia on it. I think the shields have all fallen off now, but the dragons are still there. This was a chandelier that we restored for Chatsworth. They got some pieces, but they wasn't sure what it was. So it took me quite a long time to work out by process of elimination how it went together, and I made the missing pieces, and I made this chandelier up for them. And it is an important chandelier by a company called Perry, and it went in the Duke and Duchess's private dining room, and they were delighted with it. This is Emmanuel College, Cambridge, and this is in their chapel. And the chandelier there is one of the very earliest English crystal chandeliers from about 1732 maybe, and they asked us to restore it. And when we took it apart, I found a newspaper inside which said 1732. That was the chandelier that was restored, and by coincidence, while I had that here, we were asked by a Dutch antique dealer if we could restore his chandelier, and which was very similar, perhaps a year earlier, or a couple of years earlier. So anyway, we restored it, and he put it into auction last year with Sotheby's, and as you can see, the estimate was £100,000 to £150,000. It actually sold for £450,000. And we actually have that chandelier hanging in our workshop at the moment because it's back with us again. The person that bought it wants it electrified to hang in his dining room, and so we are electrifying it with electric candles, but without drilling any holes or doing any damage to the original chandelier. This is the Clothworkers Hall, which we've enjoyed having our livery dinners there, and we made all of the chandelier, nearly all of the chandeliers for Clothworkers Hall. This is probably one of our best-selling chandeliers. This is the copy of the Thornham Hall chandelier. Thornham Hall is a stately home up in Norfolk, and this is regarded, or the original was regarded as the one of the earliest English crystal chandeliers. And English Heritage at Chiswick House asked us if we could make one for Chiswick House, and that was the chandelier that we made for them, because they wanted something as early as possible, and we've made it many times since then. And we've made various versions of it. That's the same chandelier with 2 tiers of arms, and there's another one there on the left with cut arms and slightly different drip pans. So these are some of the things that we've made over the years. This is not a very good photograph, but this is the Royal Exchange where we made all of the chandeliers. And this is one of the chandeliers we made for Osborne House on the Isle of Wight. English Heritage contacted me and said, we want to replace the chandeliers. We don't know where the originals have gone. We know they've got a pair of candelabra that were made by Osler, but we did have 3 chandeliers here, and I don't know where they are, but they're probably in another one of the royal palaces. So I checked around, and someone told me that they were, you know, one of the people, one of the stewards at Osborne said to me, "Yeah, at the Pink House." And I said, "Well, what's the Pink House?" And he says, "It's Royal Lodge. It's where the Queen Mother lives." So I said, "Oh, okay." So I wrote to the Queen Mother's equerry and asked if I could go and have a look and explain what I wanted to do. And she very graciously allowed me to go along and have a look at the chandeliers, which allowed me to measure every single component, and so that when I reproduced them, I could get them exactly right. But they were filthy dirty. They probably hadn't been cleaned for 50 years. And so I wrote back and said, "Thank you for allowing me to look at the chandeliers, inspect them and measure them. Can I offer to clean them for £200 or whatever it was?" It wasn't very much money. So they agreed, and I got a lovely letter back saying that Her Majesty was so pleased that it reminded her of being a child again, seeing the chandeliers sparkle again. So yeah, a lovely letter I received for that. So and then in 2004, the Queen came to Osborne House to view it. The year before, Prince Andrew had come to the house to view the restoration, and I was introduced to him. There was 3 of us that were introduced. It was me who did the chandeliers, the lady who did the curtains that you can see in the background there, and the gentleman that provided the carpets. And so we were introduced to Prince Andrew, and then he must have gone back and he said, "Guess what, Mum? Guess where I've been?" So the next we hear is we have to do another visit because the Queen wants to come back. And so she came back in 2004, and the 3 of us were asked to be presented to the Queen again. And they said to me, "Right, what you do is you don't say anything, you just stand there quietly, and someone will come along with the Queen, and they will say." They will introduce you, and they will, and you'll bow and you'll shake hands, and you don't say anything until she says something to you. And it didn't work like that, because I could hear these footsteps come round, and she walked straight up to me. She said, "Who are you?" So I sort of was bowing and curtsying and doing whatever I shouldn't have been doing, and sort of said, "Oh, I'm the man who did the chandeliers." And I should have said, "I'm your glass chappie," because that's what she calls me, apparently. In the glass pantry, she said, "Can you get my glass chappie to come and have a look at this thing for me? Something's broken." On that, I'm going to tell you my Duke of Edinburgh story now as well, which was very topical at the moment. Next to the Queen, obviously, was the Duke of Edinburgh was in the same party, and he came along and he walked in and he said to me, "What do you do?" So I said, "Well, I made the chandeliers, Your Honour." And he said, "Oh, yeah, we've got nice chandeliers at Buckingham Palace, you know." So I said, "Yes, I know, I've seen them and I've worked on some too." "Yeah, very good." And then he said to the lady next to me, he said, "Well, what do you do?" And she said, "Oh, well, I made all the drapes, Your Highness." And he said, "Oh, yes, they're very nice." He said, "We've got really nice drapes at Buckingham Palace, you know." So she said, where are they made?" She said, "Oh, they're made in," I can't remember where it was. He had asked me where mine were made, and I said, "Oh, they're made in London." And then the man at the end, he said, "And what do you do?" And he said, "Well, I made the carpets." And he said, "Oh, we've got some nice carpets at Buckingham Palace, you know." And he said, yes, I know you do. He said, and where are these made? And he said, Turkey. He said, huh, bloody typical, and walked off. So I thought that was typical of the Duke. So this was the drawing room with 2 of the 3 chandeliers you can see there. This is Spencer House in St James's. This was the London Palace or the London home of the Spencer family. It was acquired by the Rothschild Foundation, and they spent millions and millions having it, restoring it all, and it's now available for functions and things. And they lost all of their chandeliers, so they came to me, or the interior designers came to me and said, could we recreate all the chandeliers that were there before? So we made, I think we've made 6 maybe in there. There's obviously that set of 3 in the Grand Saloon. Somerset House, we were asked to make these specialised lanterns. This is a crystal table we made for one of the royal families in the Middle East. It's a bit difficult to tell the scale of it there, but that's about 3/4 of a ton of glass there. It's about 9 foot across. So we made 2 tables. One like this and another one that was 10-sided, and for many years that customer was our best customer, and we've made several other things. We've done sets of 10-foot tall candelabra, and can't think of some of the other things we've made, but lots and lots of things. So another job that we did was the Reform Club in Pall Mall, and as you can see, it's got a crystal roof, and it was made, I think, in about 1832, something like that, a raw-time frame with a leg crystal, cut leg crystal panes in it, and there was 250 of them were broken, and the rest of the 770 were all stained, and you couldn't see through them. So they asked us we had to take all of the pieces out, and then we had to make 250 new pieces of glass. At that time, we didn't have our own glass house, and some of the pieces were so big I wasn't quite sure how I was going to do it, or where I was going to get the glass from, because it was nearly 1 inch thick. So I went to Pilkington's, and they made me a special batch of dense flint glass, which is about 46% lead crystal, very, very, very high. It was meant for some other application, not for roofs, but for me it was nice and soft, and we could bend it and we could cut it and polish it. I had to buy 8 tons of it, which in those days cost £50,000, and we only used 3 tons of it on the roof. So I've gradually been selling off the remainder of it over the years. So and that just shows you some of the detail in these panels. It was a big job that took us, I think that was about 2 or maybe 3 years work to restore that roof. This is the Royal Opera House, and we were involved in the big restoration there. It's a magnificent opera house now, something that we can be very proud of. It compares well with the other great opera houses of the world. But these wall lights that you can see that go around the balcony fronts, they used to have a big man called Charlie who was about 6'6", and he used to lean over the balcony and change the light bulbs. And they said, well, no, we can't carry on doing that. Health and safety won't allow that. So they said, can you come up with a different method of changing the bulbs? So we redesigned them, and in the top of those shades there's a little cross of steel, or a little wire cross, and you use a long pole with a hook on it, and you can hook the shade, and the bulb and the inside of the candle is all attached to it all in one go. you can then change the bulb and then put them back in. Of course, in those days, the bulbs didn't last very long. Now we have LED bulbs; they last for last years and years. So this was St George's Hall in Liverpool. This was the building that the leader of the Liverpool Council, I think, Derek Hatton, Diggsy, he wanted to tear it down and build a multi-storey car park, but luckily Prince Charles stepped in and said, no, you can't lose this. This is one of the most important architectural pieces, buildings in Liverpool. You should be proud of it. Anyway, they restored it. And in the small music room, was the chandelier made by Osler. It hadn't been touched for years and years. There were, when I went there, it still had all the gas jets. It was still connected to all the gas pipes, and there were just light bulbs dangling down inside it. There was also lots of birds' nests and pigeon nests inside it. So we took it down, restored it, made lots and lots of the pieces of it, and put it back up. A magnificent chandelier that I'm very proud of. This one on the left there is that's the chairman of Goodyear, and on the left-hand side it is Rusty Wallace, who was the NASCAR racer, and the chairman of Goodyear wanted to give a gift to Rusty Wallace, who'd won the NASCAR championship with his tyres, and so we were asked to make this crystal model of his car. Well, the only people that I could use in those days was Nazing. And I don't know if Stephen or Sammy are online tonight, but we took us several attempts because it's such a big block of glass. Every time it goes through, they have a travelling leer, so you put hot glass in one end, and an hour or so later it comes out the other end cool. But of course, a big block of glass like that, it's still red hot inside and cold on the outside, so the thing shatters. So in the end, what we had to do was they made us another one. This went on for weeks and weeks and weeks. They made us another one. We wrapped it in asbestos wool, put it in a big box, and we drove high speed from Nazing down to our factory and quickly stuck it in a kiln and heated it back up again and let it cool down over a week. And that, luckily, it survived, and we were able to engrave it. And it was presented to Rusty Wallace. The man on the right there, you will recognise him, I'm sure. Calm down, dear, it's only a commercial. Michael Winner, he was a really good customer of mine, and he had a house in Melbury Road in Kensington. It was called, I think what it's called, Woodland House. Now, it was this house built for the artist Sir Samuel Luke Fildes. I think that's how you pronounce his name, Fildes. And the house was built 1857, and 1875 to 77, and this was the artist's gallery where he did all his work. Well, when Michael Winner bought the house, or he acquired the house from his family, he wanted this to be his bedroom, and he claimed it was the biggest bachelor's bedroom in London, and he wanted the biggest crystal chandelier. So I made this big chandelier for him, and he quite often used to take me out when he did his restaurant critics, reviews, and so he'd say, David, I'm sending the rolls round. We're going out to eat at Marco Clear White's. These I'm going to have to speed up because I'm taking too long. These are some pieces that we made for a royal family in the Middle East. It was for the royal wedding when the Crown Prince was married, and we made all of the centerpieces that went on the table in the ladies' majlis, which was the reception just for the ladies, not for the men. And they spent £445,000 with me making all these different stem pieces and perfume bottles and things. There's a big chandelier we made for a Russian customer. That was an enormous one, and we sent it all out in pieces, and they put it together. We never heard that they did anything. You know, they didn't break anything. This was a set of 3 blue crystal chandeliers that we made for a dining room in Qatar for one of the royal family, and we have the 4th one hanging in our glass house over the top of where my glassmaker Carl works. We do coloured chandeliers. There's a ruby one we did for the Sultan of Oman, an amber one we did for someone, can't remember where, turquoise blue. These are some chandeliers we made for a house in South Carolina. It's called Joy Cottage, and it goes in their ballroom. So have you ever heard of a cottage having a ballroom with 2 huge chandeliers and a dozen wall lights? It's got 65 rooms, this cottage. Yeah, lovely place. This is a chandelier that was lost in a house in Gdansk in Poland. There was a wealthy merchant who bought this house, and he filled it with beautiful antiques and furniture, and he left it to the town of, or the city of Gdansk, on the understanding it would be used as a museum. When the war came, everything was taken away by the German conservators, as they called them, and then after the war, the Russians came along and destroyed the whole building anyway. After the war, the Polish people rebuilt the whole town, including this wonderful house, and the German conservators said, here's all your stuff back. But the only things that didn't survive was the chandelier. So we made this chandelier, you can see on the right, an exact copy of what we could see in that photograph. Mandy and I were invited over to Gdansk to install it, and there was a special dedicating ceremony with the TV and all the news stations there. So it was very nice to be involved in that. Some chandeliers that were made by Osler that we've restored over the years, and we are sort of regarded as the specialist when it comes to restoration or making pieces of Osler's. So you see a sideboard. There's a temple on the right hand side, chairs, a grandfather clock, a throne chair there. Some of you that have been to my house will have seen that. It's not in my house now, but it was in my workshop when you came. Mirrors, a pair of cheval mirrors. This isn't Oslo. This is a house in London, in Kensington Palace Gardens, for one of these very wealthy people, and they wanted a chandelier to hold their ice cream glasses on. And then these are pictures of chandeliers we made for the Lanesborough Hotel, one of the biggest jobs we've ever had. We made 50 chandeliers for principally the main reception rooms and the royal suite, and several of their best bedrooms. As you can see, the picture on the left was a photograph of an original chandelier that they wanted for one of the royal bedrooms, or one room in the royal suite. And on the right is our representation of the chandelier that we made. For the restaurant, the Apsley restaurant, as it was going to be called then, it's now called Celeste. As you can tell, I've got Mandy prompting me from the side. They said, we like this chandelier, this style, we want them really big. And so this is our concept of what we want it to look like. And so we said, okay, we can do them. So that's what we did. That's 2 meters across, the one on the right, and about 1.5 meters across the one on the left. Huge things. Stowe School, there was just this drawing of something that hung in the library, and this is, we ended up making them for Stowe School. This was a photograph of the one of the rooms. That's the blue room, I think, but they had a matching chandelier in the music room, and both were lost. So this was the one that we made. That's in the music room, and I have just heard they're talking about replacing the one for the blue room as well, so keeping my fingers crossed. This is a Lobmeier chandelier made in Vienna, and they wanted it for the a royal exhibition, what do we call it? At the Queen's Gallery, and it was the art of the garden, and so we restored this. We borrowed it from Osborne House, restored it all, which the Royal Collection paid for, and we hung it at the exhibition, and then after the exhibition we took it back over to Osborne House again. This is a roof light for the Marks Club in London. We can do all sorts of things, and there's 10,000 variable LED lamps above there. So when it's during the day, it's bright, it looks like sunlight's coming through, and at night it's dull when it looks like moonlight's coming through it. So this is our factory now, where we are in Vregge. The building on the main building used to be a swimming pool, and our house is over to the right out of this shot, the other side of the courtyard. So we managed to get listed building consent to convert it into this barn with enough strength in it to hang all the chandeliers. We can hang up 8.5 tons of chandeliers inside the barn. And the office up the top of those stairs is where I'm sitting and talking to you from now on, being prompted every now and again by Mandy. This is the tallest chandelier in the UK, as far as I know. It's over 11 meters tall, and Jodie, this was her design for the Hythe Imperial Hotel. It was to go through the staircase, it was to light several floors, and it was Jodie's first design, and she she did all the drawings for it, she designed it, and she oversaw the production of it in the workshops. You can see it's quite a big, what a big chandelier. So some of you I know have been down there. It's an impressive piece. So now we're moving up to date, and last year, I've always, for the last 20 years, I've used Carl Nordbrook to blow my glass for me, and he was based over on the Isle of Wight, and he had his own glass house, and we'd send things over to him, and he'd blow them and send them back, and then we'd cut them. 2 years ago, he lost his premises and was trying to get somewhere else and couldn't find it, and he said to me, "Why don't you buy all my equipment and we'll build a glass house in your place?" So that's what we did. So this is in my warehouse, which was just used for storage before. Carl and I put the whole thing together. We had people make all the hoods things for us, and those are the two furnaces. The one on the left we built from scratch, right the way from the metal base, right the way up to the finished thing, and that is our main furnace. We can melt 250 kilos of lead crystal in that, which we do every week. On the right is a smaller one, which will take about 100 kilos, which is there for if we got a big order and we needed to melt a particular production type of glass, like blue glass or something like that, we could melt it in that furnace, or if the big one was out of action for any reason, we could light the small one up so we wouldn't lose any production. So that one is we started in July, and that's Carl gathering some glass out the furnace. And Carl and Peter both come over from the Isle of Wight, usually 3 days a week, and they blow all the bits and pieces that I need. Peter is a very good glass blower in his own right, and he actually taught Carl to blow glass, so they work very well together, and we've become very good friends. And there's a big blob of glass, hot, and there's Peter picking up with his spaceman outfit on, and he's just about that's very hot, and he's about to put it in that layer, that big oven on the right hand, the big blue oven on the right hand side, which is very hot inside. So that's why he has to wear that outfit to try and put it in there. So so up to date. This is me and my family now. So you all know Mandy and you know Jodie from the Glass Cellars, and some of you know Kate and Sam and Lucy, my other daughters. And this is in our office. And this was last year, Father's Day last year, when I had my whole family, 6 grandchildren with me and a dog. So that's us. So I hope that's I need to stop sharing now, don't I? Stop sharing.
How amazing.
Well, yeah.
Absolutely brilliant.
Sorry, it took a bit long. So
no problems at all. Yeah. Absolutely fascinating.
Thank you. I do have a 5-minute video clip, which, if anyone is interested in seeing it at the end, you know, when some of you want to go and have your dinner, if Paul doesn't mind hanging on, I can play that after any of you.
Yeah, I'd like to.
Ask me difficult ones because I don't know.
Why don't you show it, David, now?
Do you want me to?
Yes, do. Let's finish it off. Let's do it.
Okay. Share screen.
How's that?
Well, oh, I can see right anyway.
So it should be, hopefully.
Yep.
Right. So this is making a large dish, or a dish like you saw the smaller ones in the Egyptian hall. We make it is about as big as so it's about an hour's work to make a dish. Carla's already gathered half onions with the glowing iron 2 or 3 times before now, and you just going back into the furnace and adding more glass. Now it's got as much as it needs, and he is just shaping up ready. We're going to blow a bit more air into it. Is a big glass. Those of you who don't know, this is called a glory hole, and there's no glass in there, just very hot. It's about 11 degree temperature, and you just reheat the glass in there.
They're thinking submarine at the moment.
So that's newspaper that I use, which is the bubbles bigger inside the mouth. This is a very edited version of the film. As I say, it's actually about an hour's work until most of these processes take maybe 5 or 10 minutes at a time. So I just try to shorten it down just so you can see just an idea of how they do it.
Can we take a picture? Right.
So there comes a point when the thing gets too big and you go back into the glory hole again. now I think Carl has opened it up, and it's now like a bowl shape. And now Peter's making a punchy, so there's a little blob of glass, and he's going to stick it on the end. So it's obviously you've got to make sure you put it exactly in the centre. And then what they will do is they will then break the. Carl is now going to break the piece of glass off of the iron. Peter hopefully is not going to drop it. It's still a very heavy piece of glass. And then it's going to go back into the glory hole again.
Just going to take a picture of you helping us doing this in a minute, okay?
Now he's putting it into a bowl shape.
Might just be for our private gallery then. We have the children police down. So if you come here, maybe, and I'll explain what's going to happen in a minute.
This will be the last time. It may have been edited, there may have been a few more times, but this will be the last time you'll see it. So
you don't need to go too deep then. We don't want that too.
they're going to get as soft as they can so the glass becomes as soft as possible. And then what you'll do is you'll open the hole up and the feet will start to spin. And as you can see, it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And now it's a flat, wobbly disc of glass. But now as you can see, you can't go back into that area. So it's
I don't know, but it's going to be cold.
so you can wait to get out of this now. I was just shaping it with a piece of wood. See, it's all a bit wobbly and still a little bit mouldy.
Okay, when I come off, run off slightly, go dead slowly, so that it's still hot, yeah?
And after a little bit more shaping, they break it off, and then this is Peter picking it up, and that's it's going to go into the layer to cool down, and that'll take a couple of days to cool down. Now we program it so it takes a couple of days. So that's it.
Oh,
Absolutely amazing.
I apologise to the glass makers amongst you that people are trying to teach you something.
amazing.
What were you apologising for, David?
Oops.
Any of the glass makers among you that already know how this is already done, I've done it many times before, so hopefully you've found it interesting, and some of you probably wouldn't know how this is done. So
I
That
think
scale is spectacular. Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
I think it's absolutely been incredible, and the very interesting thing is that I can pick up on a couple of things just to dovetail what you've done tonight, David, which has been spectacular. You mentioned Whitefriars glass.
Yes.
Whitefriars were Britain's longest running glass house. They were reputedly around in 1720, but they were very famous because they were purchased by James Powell and his three sons in 1834, and ran in Whitefriars, just near Blackfriars Bridge area. And in fact, I have a presentation about the Whitefriars glass factory, which I've booked to do on the 3rd of June by a gentleman who is famous for knowing as much as there is about the Whitefriars glass factory.
Oh, right.
And in actual fact, I started on that story having found the amber duck, which was a story which I told last year, having found one on eBay, which was bought by Mark Holford for the company's collection, that had a glass seller's coat of arms engraved on its chest. And I've since found that we have about 4 or 5 members who have some of these ducks as they were master's presents from a banquet. And I also discovered that I have a friend who has a collection of over 200 of the famous Whitefriars ducks. But we've got that presentation coming forward. And another interesting piece of news, which I want to do more about, is that last year we had a presentation from the glass artist Emma Goring, who won the runner-up prize to the arts and crafts at the Biennale in 2019, who's been working in Denmark. Several of you may not know is that the winner of the Student Arts and Crafts Prize was a guy called Callum Dawes, who in fact is Emma's boyfriend. And they have now just secured a position in Denmark to become managers of a studio in Denmark as glass artists. So there's 2 youngsters who are now pioneering glass that we have been in touch with, and as a result of the splendid work that they've done. And Callum has in fact won another prize from the Contemporary Glass Society recently and exhibited in the Far East. So our glass story, David, which you have sort of expounded on your history, we as glass sellers are now contributing to more glass artists and enhancing the story of glass. And I think on that note, I'd say magnificent, and hopefully we can do a lot more. And I'll hand over to the master to speak further.
David, thank you for an amazing presentation. The history of the Wilkinson family was fascinating and a wonderful example of true British industrial development and artistic development, you might say. And I should add that you were ably prompted by Mendy, of course. But also the spread and variety and depth of the skills you practice is just astonishing. It blows the mind. I don't know how you can do it all. And I mean, you had tall ones, fat ones, thin ones, roofs, colored glass, multicolored chandeliers, and those astonishing tables for some chic of Araby. The whole thing is quite fantastic, and you quite clearly are the most talented chandelier maker, I think, in the world, probably. Your skills are wonderful, and thank you so much for showing us that range of beauty and skills, and for the fascinating insight into the Wilkinson family. Thank you so much on behalf of the company.
Thank you.
And I think on that note, we also have the privilege coming up also is the story of the David Williams Thomas is also going to tell us the story of his family and glass later in a couple of weeks' time, which will be another interesting story. In fact, David has been a member of the company for nigh on 60 years. So it's quite a dynasty there. And I can't remember exactly how many generations of the Williams Thomas there are, but I think it's about 5 or 6. So there's quite a story to be told there, and all to do and connected with glass. So it's quite fascinating. I don't know if any of you've got any immediate questions you'd like to ask before we sign off. Anybody?
Catherine.
As usual, can't help asking questions. Do you have an acid bath?
No, we used to do acid polishing, but it became so environmentally unfriendly and very dangerous, and it was difficult to dispose of the used acid, that we decided, and also the guy that used to do the acid polishing for me retired, and I meant that I had to do it, and I hated it, so we stopped doing it. So we just hand polish everything now. So.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
All quiet. Well, I think on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I'll let you all go off and have your suppers or nightcaps, whichever you'd like to do. And I'll be in touch very soon on our next productions so that we can all meet up again. Please stay safe and look after yourselves. I think the roadmap is doing well. It looks as though we might be meeting on the 22nd of June at the Vintners Hall, and we can all say hello to each other face to face, hopefully, and we'll be in touch soon. Good night, all. Thank you very much.
Good night.
Thanks very much, David.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Maybe.